Hey everyone, hopefully you can see me. This is Kelly with Two Broads Talking Politics. I'm on with Bryan Harnsberger. Hi, Bryan.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. So I'm going to start by mentioning why we're wearing hats while we're inside. It's not just that cold in both places, but in fact, we are wearing hats to show off Hats for Knitters for Flint. You can find out more at knittersforflint.org or on our Twitter handle, knitters, the number 4 Flint. And so hopefully you'll check that out. We're trying to raise some money for kids in Flint through knitting. So Bryan and I are both wearing hats model or knit by yours truly, and hopefully that will encourage you. I have a couple of other hats that are available if you'd like
Ooh,
money. Beautiful
ooh,
hats.
I
So
love it.
all right. But that's not what we're here to talk about today. That's just a little commercial. So, Bryan, for people who haven't seen you or heard you on the podcast before, can you just say a little background about who you are?
Yeah. So I live in Massachusetts. I am a licensed psychologist. Uh, right now, I'm specializing pretty much with millennials, but I'm also looking forward to working with more other populations like some of our furloughed workers, unfortunately. Yeah.
Okay, and so right now, what we want to talk about, one main topic and then sort of a side topic I have is people who are affected by the shutdown, which really at this point is pretty much everybody. Everybody is affected in some way. There are people who are furloughed and are very much affected that way, but there are other people who are affected just for things like being scared to go to the grocery store because
Yeah.
your produce isn't being checked by anybody, being scared to fly on a plane because, nobody's inspecting the planes. So I think, at this point, really, we're all being affected by this very lengthy, longest in history shutdown of the
Mhm.
government. So maybe just start by some things that you have heard from people about particular ways that this is affecting them.
I think that from what I've been hearing, is that it's in a lot of people's orbits, and until that it's right front center, that's when they start really paying attention to it. So, like you're saying, going out for groceries is really big. And another thing is just making sure that healthcare doesn't get disrupted. It's that daycare. I mean, there's so many other significant services right now that are affecting everyone. And if I know just in Massachusetts alone, I think we have close to 50,000 furloughed workers, and we're just a tiny state. I can't even imagine the families that's affecting and the individuals within that family. Yeah, it's insane right now.
Yeah, and so of course we have no idea how long this might go on. At this point, there doesn't seem to be an exit strategy, which is troubling, and I think leads to even more of that feeling of, oh my gosh, the anxiety that's building up. If you have a period where you're furloughed and you know how long it will be, for instance, you can plan for that.
Hmm.
But if you just have no idea, and so some people are going to get back pay if and when the government reopens, but some people, federal contractors, might not even get back pay.
Right.
So
It's
go
it,
ahead.
it sorry, it just blows my mind. Like I think there was a statistic that 80% of all Americans work paycheck to paycheck and live paycheck to paycheck. And for some individuals, yeah, they're privileged enough and in a financial situation that's comfortable enough for them to be able to plan for some of these hiccups. But this is no hiccup.
Yeah.
Um, so I don't know how we're going to get back on track and how these people are going to be okay. I would hate that for me to be me, just trying to imagine what that must be like.
Yeah.
Um, just thinking about all the different kind of mental math that you need to do. Like I can only afford this much food. I need to go and make sure I don't get produce, so I have to go to the frozen section. It just makes life so complicated.
So, what are some of the kind of basic coping strategies that you would encourage people to be thinking about, if they're in this period of extreme anxiety and not really knowing when it's going to end?
That I wish that there was a magic pill for that situation or a magic strategy, um, because we're really in murky, unknown waters. How are we supposed to um, even provide certain coping skills when, you know, people aren't really certain, like, oh, that's great. I can do some deep breathing, but there's no way I'm going to be able to convince my landlord that he's going to let me get an extension on my lease and not kick me out of the house. I think that right now, you know, just acknowledging the fact that this is not normal and validating people in terms of their position in the world and trying to figure out, okay, the thing that you can control in all of this is um, your own response to the stress that is being dumped on you due to our government. So I think that's the only way for us to really kind of center ourselves and to get focused. Like, okay, everything is calamitous. Where we don't know how money's going to come in, but I know that I can stay calm and that I need to project a state of calmness, maybe for whatever family that I'm in. If I am trying to provide, uh, or in any situation where you're being asked to do um, something for other people. Okay.
Mhm. Yeah, and so if there are people who are either themselves in sort of extreme distress right now, or they notice other people in their family, spouses, parents who are in extreme distress, what is sort of the first thing that they should do for them?
Um, Ask them or tell them that they're here for them and ask them, is there anything I can do to support you? And to really validate that right now this kind of sucks.
Mhm.
And, you know, if there's anything you can do, just put it out there. There's a recent study saying, like, we don't really know what exactly to say to a depressed person, just in general. But in terms of some of the research, that is pretty much the most universally accepted kind of message that we can portray to someone. We don't really know exactly what they're feeling or how they're experiencing these things. We know that it's terrible. Um, but the best thing for us to do is just kind of make our presence known and to show warmth and compassion and let them know that there's, you know, they're not in this by themselves.
And what's the way that you would encourage talking to kids about this? So, so far
Hmm.
at least, my kids don't know anything about what's going on. That's probably not true. They've probably heard me talking. They know something about what's going on. But, they don't feel the anxiety of the produce or the airport, and their own parents aren't affected. But for some people, certainly, their kids know that their mommy's not going to work right now. So what are some ways to sort of talk through? I know you're not a child psychologist, but just some general tips for talking to kids about what's going on.
Man, to be 100% honest, I really don't know how you could frame it in an age appropriate way that makes a whole bunch of sense to children. The
It doesn't
fact
make
that,
sense to us.
right, right. So it's like, how am I going to tell, you know, my hypothetical child that, you know, Mitch McConnell isn't allowing a bill on the floor that is going to get me back to work? Um, I think the only thing that you can do is say that, you know, uh, sometimes in government, there ends up being a little bit of break, and that it, you know, puts mommy and daddy on break, and um, this one's taking a great deal of time, and I'm really sorry I'm not going to be able to get, you know, a new pair of shoes, and but that's going to be really hard for a child to still understand. Um, in terms of food, I think the only thing that you can really do is just prevent to project a health related sort of message to your children. Just be like, you know, sometimes in the government when they have these shutdowns, this means that some of their other services. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
Um, some of the other services hang up. Um, you know that we don't have people protecting us for our foods, so we just got to make sure that we follow um, what the news tells us to do. Buy frozen fruits. Um, Instead of getting lettuce, maybe you take a risk and you get some cookie dough instead. You know?
Most kids aren't going to be mad that you're not getting lettuce.
Yeah, exactly, exactly.
be like, special fun time. You get to eat all cookies this week.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's good. And I know with my kids, the thing that they always want to know, whether or not that's what they express, what they want to know is, are we still there for them? Do we still love them?
Mhm.
And so I think that's the kind of calm that I, as a parent, try to project. It's not always easy, it's not always possible, but as much as possible to sort of be the steady, comforting influence in a child. And of course, that's very dependent on the child's life or child's age.
Mhm.
I think bringing the school into it, making sure that your child's school knows what's going on and knows, my child may be acting up a little bit, may, be a little sad sometimes because they're not sure what's going on. That the earlier you tell a school and a teacher about that sort of thing, the better.
It's and the school might also be affected by the shutdown as well. Um, I just think of this. I think it was a social psychologist. His name was Bronfenbrenner, and he used to come up with all these different systems within systems, and just how the government can affect the school system, can affect the family system, um, and how it can affect a family member's role within the family system. And I'm just thinking right now, for certain parents that might put a whole bunch of stock in the identity of being a breadwinner for the family member, for the family, how difficult that must be for them to feel like an effective parent. And if that's the case, I really hope that people can try to look at this from multiple world perspectives and see, like, I might not be able to get the paycheck this week, or it's coming up um, all zeros in my pay stub this week. But I have been able to spend more time with my children. I mean, you can't really put a shoe polish on the turd, unfortunately. And that's realistically where we're at. I feel terrible for all these furloughed workers.
Yeah, and I think that that's a good reminder to anyone out there who isn't affected, directly by the shutdown, to be calling every day, calling your senators, calling
Hmm.
your representatives, even if they're people who agree with you. We need them to see the overwhelming support that the Democrats have for their position.
Hmm.
And, the more that we can be calling, the better it's going to be for the people who are affected, because hopefully that will mean the government reopens sooner.
I can't agree with you more on this. I mean, I think that what we should be doing is challenging um, everyone out there, because I'm sure that we all have a neighbor or a friend within our different clubs or communities that is being affected by this. And I bet that there's ways that we can show support. Um, that could mean donate more to food banks, or do something informally with the individual themselves, just to show our support. This is a time that we've, ever since 2016, this has been a time that we've really depended on each other.
Mhm.
I know, as an individual myself, I've learned to lean on a bunch of individuals that I don't think I would have previous to Trump becoming president. So I think that right now, reminding ourselves to continue to expand our communities and expand our own universes and interact with other people, because right now we need to strengthen our support systems.
So another topic that, is somewhat related, but that I wanted to talk about because it affects potentially even more people, is this
Hmm.
constant barrage of news that we're getting sort of all the time. It feels like every minute is a breaking news story, that, and part of that is the way the media is framing it, but part of it really is there's just a ton going on right now.
I thought
And
that was just
it's
the Kradstein brothers that were breaking news.
but there really is breaking news.
Yeah.
So how do we sort of, you don't want to turn away. You don't want to become numb to this, but on the other hand, we have to function as human beings. And so how do we sort of strike that balance? I'm sure there's no magic answer to that, but sort of what are some ways that we can sort of think through that and think through sort of remaining calm but yet informed citizens?
So when what I'm really thinking about is how I go about treating individuals with pain or with certain somatization disorders. So in these situations, what you try to do is encourage a person um, who's hyper aware that they understand what is wrong with their bodies. They know if they turn a certain way that that's going to bring pain. But the problem is that becomes negatively reinforced. So you know that if you move a certain way, you're going to feel pain. So you just stop moving that way. And I feel like right now, the news can also leave a debilitating effect on individuals. Um, so, what we need to do is understand what a threshold of, of input we're going to have and to give ourselves different arenas for us to entertain what's going on in the news, um, what breaking news stories are going to be important on the daily basis and which ones aren't. For instance, yesterday, um, feels like there's been more and more bombshells about Trump colluding or not including, conspiring. Um, and at the same time, there was the whole Trump White Castle fiasco last night. And like I don't mean to like if I had to choose like low hanging fruit versus an actual issue, I'm gonna go and focus on an actual issue. Would it be easy for me to fire off a billion tweets making fun of all the Big Macs and the cold food and how disrespectful that was? Absolutely. But at the end of the day, what I think is more important is focusing more on the message of, okay, um, what's going on with Trump and Russia, what's going on with the Democratic platform, and what am I going to do to take care of myself at the end of the day? Those so it'd be like news, and self care.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's good. It's so easy to sort of get wrapped up in all of it. And, I think sometimes things like, the burgers in the White House, it
Yeah,
feels like almost comic relief. And that's not entirely a bad thing. Laughter is good as well, but it does sort of it makes it feel like that's just as important as everything else. And of course it's not in the grand
right,
scheme of things.
right. No, yeah, yesterday just felt so ridiculous. I haven't even been able to catch up today. Did was there news that McConnell blocked another bill being put on the floor?
Yeah, I believe so. I too have not been able to keep up with everything, but yeah, I think there was a second bill, and so yeah, I mean, I think that's sort of for me the thing to focus on is a how are people being hurt, how are real people being hurt, and b what are the ways that our democratic institutions are breaking down.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's one of the stronger, more universal moral values within the Democratic Party is compassion. And what I'm really hoping for is that um, all of these Democratic candidates that are going to be running for president or getting a very large platform are going to be able to sort of have like a Voltron esque aspect to creating like the perfect policy and message moving forward. So I'm just instantly thinking of Elizabeth Warren's anti-corruption policies that she's been putting. I mean, that's something that every Democrat could get behind. The Fair New Deal from AOC is brilliant. I think that that's something that every Democrat can get behind. Um, Raising our minimum wage, uh, universal health care. These are all excellent ideas that everyone, I think, in our Democratic Party can get behind. So, what I'm hoping is that um, uh, as we have more and more people that are stepping up and becoming Democratic or presidential candidates, that we start sharing all of our messages together and trying to form the best one moving forward. I think that's going to happen.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point that we're going to have just a ton of stuff being thrown at us soon as we're, moving toward the 2020 primaries. And so sort of focusing in on those messages and not so much about the people and what silly thing might somebody have said and who's calling who what, but focusing instead on the real issues.
And I mean, right now, if there was kind of a stoic principle or philosophical principle that I would get behind, it'd be kind of trying to assume an attitude of gratitude right now. Um, just understand that every obstacle that is coming up, whether it be a political one or non-political one, that this is just all grist for the mill. This is all just an opportunity for us to learn and to strengthen ourselves and strengthen our own characters and to build compassion for someone else if they go through something else that's really hard.
All right. Well, I think that's an excellent piece of advice for us to end on. So, Bryan, thank you so much for joining me today. Hopefully, people will find ways to get through the shutdown, and hopefully, we can all step it up and make a lot of calls to end this shutdown as soon as possible because it is hurting real people.
Absolutely. And thanks for having me on. And thanks for the hat. I love it so much. I hope that so many people go and donate and get all these awesome hats. They're the best.
All right. So hats you can find at knittersforflint.org. Reminder, just a couple of the many, many options available. So far, all of the hats have been knit by me, but I have several other knitter friends who are working on their hats right now,
Mhm.
including Joyce Vance, who is going to
Ooh.
be posting a hat. I think that might start a bidding war. So go donate to Flint and get a hat. All
Great.
right. Thank you, Bryan. And listeners, let us know if there's particular issues that the shutdown is causing for you and if there are ways that we can help.
Yes. Thank you so much.
All right. Thanks, Bryan.
See you.